Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Chandler Bolt. He is the founder and CEO at Self-Publishing School. Chandler, how you doing today, man?
I'm great, James. Great to be here.
I have been following your stuff for a long time now, Chandler, and I'm really stoked to have you on this interview. We're going to be talking about self-publishing. Obviously, you're the CEO of a company called Self-Publishing School. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of this interview, I'd love for you to just give a little bit of context to our listeners. What are you and your team up to at Self-Publishing School?
Yes. So first off, I'm super excited to be speaking to this audience. We were just talking about your audience before pressing record, and these are my people. Marketing folks and people who are growing organizations. So I'm excited to be talking to these folks. But really, what we're up to at Self-Publishing School, it's an online education company. We teach people how to write and publish their first book in 90 days. And where we kind of fit in the market is, there's a lot of people saying, hey, you should get someone to ghostwrite a book. Maybe they've been hitting up the CEO of your company saying, hey, we can ghostwrite your book. But I think there's a lot of people that have gone down that path and realized that's really hard to do well. Most times you end up with a really crappy book. Yeah. So we kind of exist to help people say, hey, yes, you can write it. And yes, it's going to be difficult. But we're going to make it as easy and as fast as possible so that you can get that sucker to the finish line and really have something that you can hang your hat on, not only from a business and marketing standpoint, but from a legacy and like a long-term life impact perspective.
I love it. So like I mentioned before, we're talking to marketing leaders at B2B companies. If you're in front of that audience, Chandler, obviously you do a lot of public speaking about this stuff, and you're on a lot of podcasts talking about it. But to this particular audience, how do you think they should be thinking about it in terms of, okay, if I were to self-publish a book, how would I actually use the book? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different ways, but I look at leads and conversions or leads and sales. Those are the two main things. And obviously there's credibility. Whether it's a career move or whether it's to grow your company, like depending on how you answer that question, then it's like, okay, well, then you're going to go down this path. But for me personally, my books drive hundreds, if not thousands of leads a month for my business. Oh. And those are leads that I get paid for. I'm not so, I spend tons of money in a lot of places to pay to get leads. But Amazon is the only place where I get paid to get leads because I'm selling books. And at the same time, I'm getting leads from these books. And I like to say that a book is, I call a book the silent salesman, right? So it's this thing that you send out into the marketplace and it doesn't say a word because it's a book, right? So it can't speak audibly unless it's an audiobook. Yeah. But so it's going out there and it's having hours and hours of long conversations with people that are your exact prospects. And then when they finally do talk to a salesperson or come to your website or anything like that, they're already sold. They're already ready to do business with you. So in my opinion, it's the best way to build out your sales team and to arm the sales team that you already have with better, more qualified leads is through that book. And then not to mention in some industries, it makes sense to have you can use it as like I kind of mentioned earlier, that calling card where if you're in a competitive space or an early market space, like let's say right now, very topical Bitcoin, right? Everyone's talking about it. People who are making all kinds of money with it won't shut up about it. I think it's a really good long-term play, but we're no doubt on a bubble right now, right? But if I wanted to capture that market, I would undoubtedly just write a book about it because there's so much noise. There's no definitive experts on the topic. So those are kind of two very different applications, one for leads and sales, the other one for a credibility play. But either way works well.
So this next piece that we're going to talk about, Chandler, is positioning, how do you think about when you're talking to aspiring authors or, VPs of marketing that are thinking about doing a book for their CEO? How do you think through positioning?
Yeah, well, I think like what's the pain in the market that I'm solving, or what's going to kind of Perry Marshall in his book 80-20 Sales and Marketing has that's one of my favorite books of all time, which I'm sure this audience either has heard about or would like to read. So I'll just throw it out there. But he talks about racking the shotgun, and he tells this story about how he was in Vegas with this guy who was kind of like a hustler, like he would like go win all this money from casinos, and they were at this bar talking, and he was learning from this guy. I'm like totally butchering this story, but we'll get the point. And they were in this bar, and they heard like, and so this guy racks this shotgun, and then he looks around the room, and he sees like 5 people turn their head, and he says, "Don't play those guys," because they know what that sound was. And he talks about this whole the process of pre-qualifying or pre-disqualifying your leads. Okay. And how, like, in poker, for example, to carry on this story, like, you're looking for marks. So you're looking for people who can easily be beaten. The guys who turn their heads, those are not marks. Don't play them. And so the same thing can be said when you're positioning your book. You're looking to disqualify people as much as you are to qualify people. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in the positioning of their book is they cast this enormously wide net and they try to please everyone. But I'm actually looking to just, hey, how can I niche down as much as possible so that I can write a very specific book that solves a specific problem for the types of customers that I'm looking for. And then they're going to self-identify, they're going to check out the book, and they're going to do business with me.
I love it. So Chandler, this next one we're going to talk about, you alluded to it earlier, but you talked about, using books to drive leads and sales. One thing kind of as it relates to that, it makes perfect sense that someone reading your book is already, drinking your Kool-Aid by the time they get to the end of it. So they're coming to your website incredibly warm, ready to do business with you. But the thing that I've always heard, particularly from people that have even gone through the traditional publishing route, is that the publishers don't tend to do a lot of marketing for your book for you. And so if you want your book to drive leads and sales, you obviously need to get the book in front of people. Can you speak to some of the tips or the tactics that you see work best as it relates to getting your book in front of your target audience?
100%. Definitely. I totally agree with you on the fact that, the publisher is not going to do anything for you. And it's funny you mentioned this. This is actually one of the most popular posts on our blog, is on the self-publishing process and like the steps that you need to take to do it well and to market it successfully. So we can link up to that in the show notes. But we talk about like 13 steps. And it's really, I'll just highlight a couple of them in this interview. I mean, there's a couple of things. Like, obviously, you need to get a good title and a good cover. Yep. I can't stress that enough. That is your billboard inside the ecosystem that is Amazon for your book.
I just wrote a post about that on LinkedIn today about people say you can't judge a book by its cover, but I do.
Oh, 100%. We all do, right? And, there's I think Google calls this the BFB test, the big effing button test, which is every time they design a page, they'll go like 10, 15 feet, step back from the computer that far. And if they don't instantly see that what action the user should take on that screen, they redesign the page. Think about the Google homepage. So simple. You instantly get it. So that's what you should be doing with your book cover. And that's, making sure that if you step 10 feet back from the computer and you're browsing the Amazon store, that your book cover is the one that pops out. And it needs to be clear. The title needs to be readable, all those things. So that's a big part of it, is making sure that your book is discoverable, making sure that the title is concise and the title is clear, and then having a book cover that really displays kind of it not only grabs attention, but it displays what the book's about. And then one last thing I'll mention on that is just have your title in the upper third. Okay. This drives me crazy, and this is like a very designer thing to do. They try to get creative, and they put the title in the lower third. And then they put some icon or logo or image or whatever on the upper third. And it just doesn't look good. And it doesn't follow like kind of the natural iPath movement that people take. I'm going like way down into nerd town here.
Super helpful.
People need to be able to, they're going to glance up in the top left and they're going to read down into the right. So you need to kind of lay out your book cover accordingly.
Okay. So beyond your book cover, what are some other things that folks can do to market their book?
100%. So I like to call this the rifle approach versus the shotgun approach, because as most of the people who are listening to this right now know, when you're building out traction channels for your business, you can't do everything. You have to narrow down on the ones that are really going to work for you. So same goes for book marketing. The shotgun approach which is what most people take. They just fire the shotgun, and spreads out a bunch of pellets, which is them trying to do everything. Right? Instead of taking the rifle approach, which is the 80-20 approach, and narrowing in on a handful of things that actually works. So one of the things that not many people know is that over 70% of all books sold are sold on Amazon. So part of that, the rifle approach for me is focusing on Amazon, especially when it comes to launching the book. I can always add the book to other stores later, but I focus there. One of the best tips that I have on launching a book successfully is to form a launch team. Which is, it's a group of advocates, people who support you and your book topic. Could be 5, 15, 50 people. I like to do a Facebook group, and then I give them an advanced copy of the book. They spread the word when it launches, and they leave a review on day one. And that does a lot of things. It helps help you have a strong launch. And obviously it gets a lot of reviews. You get feedback. It's just super valuable. These people are bought in. Obviously, if you have a ton of employees on your team, that's like a cheat code. Yeah. Yep. You have your launch team right there, their own staff, and so they can help out, and they'll feel like it's their book that's launching by the time it launches because they've been behind the scenes. So if there's just one tip that I could give, it'd be to form a launch team, focus on Amazon with that launch team, and that's going to really help with the social proof aspect. I read a book the other day, one of the best books that I've read in a long time. I actually posted about this on my Facebook. It is incredible, one of the best books I've read relative to growing revenue at your company. And the book, I looked on Amazon, I almost didn't buy it because it had 6 reviews, and cover wasn't that good. And I was just like, all of this stuff is important. So when you get these reviews, and when you kind of build out the social proof on Amazon, not only is that going to help more people buy it down the road, but it's going to help from a social proof aspect for people to know that you know your stuff.
All right, Chandler, you got to share the name of the book now that you've talked it up.
Well, I was really embarrassed when I shared this because then the author commented, and he's a really great guy, but I didn't know that he would comment because we weren't even connected. And then I just kind of was pretty intense about his cover and the lack of reviews. So I'm like, well, I'm embarrassed. But it's called Extreme Revenue Growth. It's Victor Chang. It is really good. It's a short, concise book, but it's really great.
Okay. Love it. Awesome. So I love the tip on forming a launch team. I think so many people, they invest so much time. I'm on the tail end of writing my book now, and I've been doing a lot of things, following a lot of the stuff that I've seen on your blog and the content that you're putting out, and trying to kind of build up relationships with people that I know, not that I'm only building relationships with them so that they can, be on a launch team or join, leave a review on my book on day one or whatever. But it's this idea of figuring out, for me, it's been LinkedIn, figuring out how do I get the most engagement as possible on LinkedIn. So I'm in a lot of engagement groups. I'm constantly engaging on other people's content. And one thing, there's a guy named Alan Gannett. He's been very active on LinkedIn in the last 6 months. He's the CEO of a company called TrackMaven. We've had him on this show. He did something that was brilliant that, as we're talking about book marketing, I'll share here. He has been all over LinkedIn doing these LinkedIn videos for the last 4 or 5 months probably. And he replies to, seems like every comment. Somebody will comment on it, and he's leaving a reply, individually engaging with all these people. And he's built a ton of relationships that way. I get a direct message from him. I see that he's just opened up the pre-order page on Amazon for his book, and he did a video about, hey, you should pre-order my book. And to your point about the shotgun approach, that's a shotgun approach, right? Like you're putting a video out to lots of people. And I didn't pre-order because it was, I saw the video and I didn't do anything. But later that afternoon, Chandler, he sent me a direct one-to-one message that said, "Hey, James, thank you so much for that offer that you gave me the other day. We had offered to do a podcast launch for his company." And he was like, he called that out. So I was like, oh, he's actually sending me a message. It isn't just this copy and paste thing. And he was like, would love for you to pre-order the book. Here's the link if you're interested. Have really appreciated all the engagement, we've had the last few months. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I pre-ordered the book and it's not a cheap book. It's not like it's crazy. No book is crazy expensive, but I went and pre-ordered it right there because I was like, man, talk about a one-to-one approach. And the sniper rifle as opposed to the shotgun. I just thought that was just an incredible, because it wasn't just that he sent me a message, right? Like for months he'd been building up his channel on LinkedIn, building relationships at scale with content, and then engaging with anybody that engaged with him, and deploy the one-to-one message to get people to I can't imagine that I'm the only person he did that with, right? Like I can't say for sure that he was, doing it with hundreds of people, but I wouldn't be shocked if he did. And because of that, now he's got all this traction and these pre-launch sales going into his launch. I think his book launches in April or something. So that's one example that I saw. Chandler, you've given us a ton of information here. If somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you, they want to learn more about Self-Publishing School, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Cool. Yeah. So we're over at self-publishingschool.com. And then I have some training that you guys might find helpful, which is at self-publishingschool.com/free. So this is kind of like, I want to say it's like 45 minutes to an hour of me going into like the 3-step writing process, how we launch the book successfully, how to kind of hone in on your idea, that sort of thing. So that's at self-publishingschool.com/free.
Chandler, this has been phenomenal, man. Obviously, with me going through the book writing process, I was very excited to chat with you, and you did not disappoint. So thanks for sharing this with our listeners, and I'm stoked to stay connected with you, man.
No problem. Thanks, James, and good luck on the rest of your book.
If you've been getting value from this podcast, you can help us reach more people by reviewing the show on iTunes. Here's how you can leave a review in less than a minute. Open your podcast app and tap the search icon in the bottom right corner. Type in B2B Growth, then select our show. Once you're there, tap the Reviews tab and tell us what you think of the show. These reviews help us out a ton.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.